thank you very much. These are kind of high. I'm going to pull them down. Sorry, I was chatting outside. My name is Allison, and she just gave me my introduction. And I'm going to give you guys a little introduction about these lovely people at this table. We're missing somebody. Okay, we're going to keep going. First, we have AC Braddock. AC Braddock is a rock star CEO of the industry's most innovative and respected extraction technology company, and she's also a career entrepreneur. She has a keen eye for new trends, product placements, business strategy, and creating a strong corporate culture and infrastructure for effective growth. These skills, along with her intense interest in botanicals as medicine and humanitarian issues, drive her in educating the industry and those it serves in a safe, healthful methods of producing concentrates. In 2010, AC became CEO of Eden Labs and proceeded to guide the company through exponential growth. She's super involved in the majority of women's organizations out there, including she was the founding supporter of WOW, Women of Weed, Cannabis Women's Alliance, and Women Grow. She's also a board member of the Council of Responsible Cannabis Regulation and NCIA, the National Cannabis Association in America, and NCC, National Cannabis Coalition. Marcus Richardson is absent, but we have Matt Ellis. Matt Ellis is president and lead designer at Extraction Tech Solutions located in Denver. He's recognized as an expert on hydrocarbon extraction equipment for the cannabis industry. He's co-founder of Organa Labs, Oregon's first licensed manufacturer of infused products in 2008. Established in response to the growing need for well-manufactured, safe equipment for the emerging industry, Extraction Tech was founded in 2011. He has an awesome closed-loop machine that is called the LHBES 1200 TM, and it meets all of the standards for state regulatory agencies, and he offers products and services to extraction clients. He's also recently awarded the United States utility patent related to the design of the most modern hydrocarbon extraction equipment used today. Dr. Andrew Way, he is with us from Anandia Labs, Cannabis Plant Analytics Division, and he played a key role in the design and implementation of the quality control testing of cannabis at Anandia. His industry experience in natural products, chemistry, toxicology, and cannabis science, along with formal training in science outreach, helps Anandia effectively engage with various actors in the burgeoning cannabis industry. He has a PhD from the University of Ottawa in plant chemistry and neuroendocrinology. Welcome, esteemed panelists. So thank you guys for hanging in with us, and so we're going to go ahead and jump into some questions. So one of the latest crazes in the States, and I think it's starting to come to Canada, is this HTFSE, and it's the high terpene full spectrum extraction. Has this product made its way up north yet? Are you guys seeing any of this? Yes? No? Okay, well then we're going to learn about it. So can you talk a little bit about this, Matt? Do you have experience with this type of extraction?
Yes.
Can you speak a little closer to me?
Is that better? Can everybody hear me?
Absolutely.
All right,
Thanks.
cool. The HTSFE.
Yes.
Yes. It's basically a hydrocarbon extraction where in the extraction process they leave solvent left in the collector, and they pour that off into some sort of jar. And what that does is the solvent itself will self-insulate, so that it doesn't remove, and it allows the THCA to crystallize and precipitate out, along with the terpenes. So,
how is this different from regular hydrocarbon extraction?
Most of the time that you do it, you'll actually do a fresh frozen extraction. So that means basically that you will take your material and not dry it out, basically freeze it, and then run it through your material, run it through your column or your extractor. And when you do that, it preserves a lot of the terpenes. The issue with the extraction process in this method is that you are exposed to a lot more solvent. So you definitely want to do it in more of a controlled environment that's nice and like class 1 div 1 or good ventilation.
What is the difference in taste with this product?
Because it has more terpenes, it's definitely more of a terpene-rich product, and so it turns out to be very nice.
Cool. Thank you very much. We're going to welcome Marcus Richardson to our panel. I'm going to quickly tell you.
Apologies for being late.
Yeah, it's all right. He's the pioneer in the field of medical cannabis, as well as an entrepreneur, macro photographer, and he's founder of Freshheadies. He's also one of the founders of Jamaican-based company Cannabinoid Research and Development, and he is known for his bubble hash bags, and so hence the name Bubbleman that they call him online. So my next question is actually, what is the shelf life difference in extracts? Between bubble hash, BHO, PHO, what's the shelf life? Did you want to start? CHCO2 as well?
So the CO2 extraction process is unique in that it is an antibacterial. CO2 extraction, or CO2 not extraction, but CO2 is used to sterilize organs before they're placed into surgeries for the human body. So given that, the shelf life for CO2 is quite long, but any oil has to be refrigerated or else it will eventually go rancid, which we're shocked to see how many people think that they can just put it on a shelf in a closed container and think it's going to keep, but it really needs to be refrigerated.
So are you saying all extractions need to be refrigerated?
If they're oils.
Okay. Do you want to answer this for butane, for PHO?
It depends on the product that comes out. So if it's an oilier oil, it does tend to need to be refrigerated and kept in a dry, cool environment. I've also seen that if you dry the material out, like as in waxes and shatters, they can actually stabilize and actually, as long as they're not in sunlight or in a high humid area, they'll actually stabilize for quite some time. Shatter itself will fall out of suspension if you it'll basically auto butter, if you will. But other than that, it's still a good product.
Cool. Thanks. Andrew, do you want to add anything to this?
I guess the only thing I would chime in on there is that the solvents are inherently antibacterial, depending on the solvent. If you're talking about an organic one or CO2, but then the amount that's in your product might vary. If you're for CO2 or butane, you wouldn't expect there to be any left in there. But the chief things are light degrades cannabinoids, and if you can keep it in a sealed thing and nice and cool, then.
And water. Want to keep water out of
Yeah, you want to keep water out of there, absolutely, no matter what temperature. There are studies that show cannabinoids breaking down or changing even at -20 if there's water present. In a tincture, you might expect there to be a pretty good stability because you have an alcohol present to keep any bacteria from growing.
I'm going to present this then to Marcus. Bubble hash, it has water in it. That's the universal solvent that's used to create it. So what would be the shelf life of a non-solvent or water extracted product?
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by shelf life. It's important to note that because of the importance of terpenes and how they modulate the effects of cannabinoids, the thing that's really going to be more affected by life cycle than anything, like way more than cannabinoids, a lot of the research that was done in the 70s and the 80s with Indian and Afghani hash, saying that they saw a 3 or a 4% drop. Those hashes only had 15 to 20% cannabinoids in the first place. They were nothing compared to what we're producing today. And so for this question, I was actually going to bring some 10-year-old bubble hash that I have at my house. I wanted to kind of show you guys what it means, like shelf life. It depends on if you want to purchase something and preserve it the way it is, because the cannabinoid profile and the terpene profile is exactly how you want it. However, with the beauty of cannabis, you also have the ability to release certain terpenes, and some of the lighter terpenes, the monoterpenes that are more caustic and more volatile, it's sometimes, and especially nowadays with everyone doing things fresh, frozen, and live, these are terpenes that we used to evaporate out and cure out of our cannabis. We would never smoke those because they're harsh and they hurt our throats. Now it's really popular for marketing. It's got really strong taste. It's really harsh on the throat. But I know people that are much more interested in purchasing those products and curing them out to release those monoterpenes. So shelf life is a tricky one. Like I said, the hash that I have that is 10 years old has been at room temperature for 10 years. I have also the same hash that I've kept in a cellar at around, I'd say around maybe 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And the differences in them is vast. And in this particular hash, it got much, much nicer and much more of a profound, whether it was recreational or medical that I was using it for, effects were had on it. So it's a tough question to answer accurately. There's sometimes you want to let things degrade a little bit. That being said, your water hash should never have water present. That really implies that you're doing it incorrectly. Just because you use water to extract something doesn't mean that you can't remove that water. There are definite techniques that are available. Simple things like laboratory grade freeze dryers will do that very well. But you can also do it more inexpensively without the machinery.
Very cool, thanks. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Which form of terpenes which form of extractions, maintains the most terpenes? Would you like to start, AC?
Well, obviously this is a big point of contention between several different extraction processes. But
That's why I asked it.
Thanks, Allison. And there is quite a bit of misinformation out there about CO2 as far as the terpene profiles. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Terp Festival in
The Terp
Seattle.
Festival is July 15th in Seattle.
It's the third one. The first one was in Seattle. The second one was in Arcata. And it's back in Seattle again this year.
Yay.
And actually, the very first one that we did, a CO2 extraction won for the most terpenes over rosin.
And it had actually more terpenes. They were so confused at how high the terpenes were that they thought he had added terpenes in, but he did not.
And it was a single process extraction, which they didn't believe either because nobody had seen anybody do it. So I think there's terpenes in certainly in high quantity in multiple different extraction processes, but I will say that CO2 is pretty exceptional. I mean, being a tunable solvent, you can run it subcritical, and with our systems you can pull a fraction. You can separate out the terpene fraction and then pull that off, close the system back up, and continue to run to get your bulk cannabinoid profile, winterize that and reintroduce, or just run subcritical and put that straight in a vape pen. So it just depends on the system and what you're trying to get.
Matt, can you answer this too, please?
So in my research, I found that propane actually pulls better terpene profiles. In the stuff I've
Propane
done.
more so than butane.
More so than butane.
Really?
A mixture of both does actually help. So being able to formulate that mixture does work. What we've got to understand is one of the biggest misnomers is that if the terpenes aren't there, we can't get them. So when you
They do
dry
have to be in
out,
there.
you dry out your material and it's been sitting there for years, and you're like trying to extract it, it's not going to be terpene rich at all. So one of the things, and I think one of the reasons CO2 got a bum rap on this is because people were trying to take trash and turn it into gold, and they were like, oh, the terpenes aren't there, and it's no good. And so if you use good flour and you have good terpenes and good clean flour, then you'll have terpenes there in all the extraction methods. Whether you do it fresh frozen, whether you do it dried out, as long as you preserve it and treat the material nice, then it'll be there to get.
Sounds good. Marcus, I would like for you to chime in with the bubble hash version of.
Well, I agree with much of what he was saying in regards to it's really important to factor in the cultivar. If it's not necessarily an extraction process, if the cultivar was producing 5% plus terpenes and everything else in the contest was producing between 1 and 2%, which is a lot more on par for most cannabis. There are rare people who are going to come into the game and they're going to have 5, and there are very, very, very rare people who have been breeding cannabis, and believe it or not, that some of these cultivars are up to close to 10% terpenes. And so if you had something like that, I don't care what kind of extraction process you did with it, you would probably come out with a lot more terpenes than cultivars that obviously didn't produce that many. So for me, my answer is the coldest process. Whichever one can get to minus 40, minus 50, minus 60 is going to preserve the most terpenes and is going to have the highest yield of what's available. So something like liquid nitrogen, you could prepare with liquid nitrogen before you did a process like CO2 or butane. And if you did that, you would be preserving the material before it even went into the machine with those sub-zero temperatures. Something simple like that could be the difference between winning a contest and losing a contest.
Cool. Thanks, Marcus. Matt, So can you compare the facility requirements for hydrocarbon extraction as opposed to CO2 and other forms of extraction?
Yes, with hydrocarbon extraction, because it is a flammable solvent, it does require, at least in the States, is a Class 1 DIV1 rating for your environment. And so basically what that means is that you just wouldn't have electricity in there. You'd have lights. Your lights would be a Class 1 DIV1 light, and you just wouldn't need electricity. You'd have air ventilating and recycling the room, so good airflow. And we've designed the equipment to actually not require electricity to run, so it just basically makes it a safe environment for everyone. As far as CO2 goes, they do need a CO2 evacuation system. I think that's one of the main requirements for CO2 that I'm aware of. So at the end of the day, designing a room, it's not that difficult. It's not that expensive. So, yeah.
AC, do you want to chime in on this?
No, I think Matt kind of covered it. I mean, yeah, I know. There's obviously you have to have a quick air exchange for CO2. Obviously, you don't have to build out for an explosive material with that, but that's the only thing I could add.
Cool, thank you. Andrew, can you talk a little bit about pesticides in extractions?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that people might think they can do is, I use some pesticides, but I'm going to do a concentration of my cannabinoids or an extraction of my cannabinoids. And what often happens is that you're not only concentrating those target analytes, which are your cannabinoids, you could be concentrating potentially harmful pesticides as well. So you'll see a pesticide level like this and a cannabinoid level like this in the flower. And then if you go to your extract, the cannabinoid levels go up this much, well, your pesticide levels are going to go up a corresponding amount if they have similar chemistry, which a lot of pesticides do, because cannabinoids are lipophilic, or they like to be in oil. A lot of pesticides are like that as well. Otherwise, they would just wash off the leaves the first time it rains on a crop, which isn't a desirable effect. So if you're using you shouldn't be using pesticides. We'll just qualify that right off the bat.
Just say no.
But if there are pesticides present, you could be making it an even worse problem by doing the extraction. There are ways to purify cannabinoids. People say, okay, well, I'm going to get like to 99% purity of that other 1%. Unless you're testing for the pesticides, then you don't know what that's going to be. So, yeah, and it's quite sophisticated to tease out all the different chemistry just within a plant, just the plant chemicals, let alone when you start adding synthetic ones. So. Yeah.
So I have a question for you. So say like I have a crop, it didn't turn out so well, my buds weren't so great, something happened during the grow process, and I figured, cut my losses, I'll turn it into, an extraction. Is it possible to turn garbage into gold?
I guess
It's called. Sorry.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of garbage it is, I guess. If it's it could be trim, or it could be just a crappy bud or whatever. But you can extract that and get cannabinoids and concentrate it. And a concentrated THC, if that's what you want, you just want the THC or whatever, then that's great. But like these guys mentioned earlier, if you have a good quality bud with a nice terpene profile or a nice cannabinoid profile that's desirable, when you extract that, you're going to come out with a better product. It's like, yeah.
Matt, I see that you want to chime in.
Yeah, I do want to add. So pesticides are bad. Obviously, don't use those. But so we go to natural pesticides like rosemary and neem oil and all that, which do break down if you give it enough time. So, but if you 2 weeks before harvest, if you spray it with rosemary and then you go to extract it, and you're like, why does my extract taste like rosemary? It's because it didn't break down. So. Using natural pesticides and herbicides are good. Just make sure you give them enough time if you're going to do extract that they actually break down. So it's very important.
AC, I see you might want to add in.
What was the last thing you were talking about?
Oh, it's like if it's a low potency, you can still get like a high potency product if you can do the proper purification, like trim.
No, that wasn't it.
You want to add? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mark.
I would just add that the reason what he was saying was, and it's not sometimes, it's every time, if you have pesticides and you try to clean your oil, even if you're using molecular distillation, like a VGA root science unit.
Yes, you're still going to have
pesticides have the same molecular weight as cannabinoids, and the way those units work is they separate things out by molecular weight. So you're not going to be able to separate out pesticides with distillation, creating a 98 or 97 or 99% cannabinoid. You're going to have concentrated the poisons that were in that plant into a very, very, very crucially dangerous level. And if you're selling it under the guise of a medical, it's very low integrity. People should throw that stuff away.
And you should ask at your dispensaries to see if they put pesticides in the beginning products, because you should. Why
Always ask for
always
clean
ask
grain.
for clean grain?
Yeah.
Did you want to add, Etta? I'm sorry, AC. God.
Yeah, so I remember what it was. So you were asking about, really bad material and what you do with it, and that's how distillate was created, basically. Was
You can take your poo-poo and make it clear.
The clear is basically because they had a lot of really bad material, and they just stripped it clean of everything, and that's why it's clear
That is.
and has no flavor.
Yes. Jump in, Andrew.
Sorry, I just want to make one point back to the what Mark mentioned about the pesticides and just the trouble that they can give a processor. If you have 10 different types of cannabis or 10 batches of cannabis that you're processing and you're recycling your solvents even, you can, like, if they're all organic but the second one was actually like a pesticide had been applied to it, so you'll extract that cannabis, and then if you recover your solvents, you're then contaminating your next 8 batches. It can be contamination from the solvents if you're recycling them. It can also be contamination just from the equipment if you're not cleaning the equipment properly as well. So just it's a can of worms.
It
the
definitely requires a very
Can of worm.
professional level of SOP. That a lot of people that maybe started out in their garages aren't understanding that there's really serious standard of operating procedures that go into these things. And when you do it correctly, it's really great and it's safe. And if you make key mistakes, well, we all know what human error leads to.
I guess we didn't touch on poor quality bud or contaminants as well as like microbial stuff. If you got like a really moldy bud or something.
Share with us, please.
Well, I wouldn't recommend anyone make like a strawberry jam out of really moldy strawberries. So the same thing would go with cannabis, because even though you're pulling out the cannabinoids and you're leaving the cells behind, like the mold and spores, those are actual physical structures. You can be extracting different toxins that they produce or allergens. If you have people with like autoimmune problems, and some of the most carcinogenic substances on the planet are produced by molds. So,
And if they say garbage in, garbage out, you're going to get what you put into it.
Yeah, and we get this question a lot. Does the extraction process with CO2, kill the molds or get rid of the molds? And it'll kill the mold, but it's still there. And if the water is introduced, it's mold. Mold's practically indestructible.
And then you inhale that into your lungs.
Yeah,
That's just
it's not
no
good.
bueno.
So,
Marcus, can you tell us about the difference between chemical extractions and trichome separation?
Well, it sort of sounds like you're asking what the difference between hashish and oil is. And so from what
Absolutely.
I've read over the years from the school of Robert Connell Clark and his great book Hashish, that states that if the glandular trichome head has been melted off, whether with a chemical solvent or with heat and pressure like rosin, that's still going to be an oil. There's a wax membrane. And then there's the fibrous mat that much of the cannabinoids are cooked into being that exists in the top of the glandular trichome. That a basic, very quick science lesson is that there are these types of organelles in the base of the trichome called vacuoles and plastids. One produces phenols, which are alcohols. One produces hydrocarbons, which are terpenes. And those are the building blocks of all of the cannabinoids and terpene profiles that cannabis produces. And it does so in this fibrous mat. And when you make oil, you leave that fibrous mat behind. And when you make hash that's microencapsulated in resin glands, it's present. And that's why there's a difference. I like oil and I like hash, but to me, hash just feels like, from an adult use, recreational or medical, it feels like a little bit more of a 3 or a 4-course dinner compared to oil that always has felt to me, from someone who smoked hashish for 20 plus years. I haven't smoked cannabis for 16 years now at all, just hashish, I just noticed it very strongly. So nowadays, I don't think one's better than the other. I think that having the quiver is important. When people ask me what I think about distillates, I say, well, I mean, having monomolecular medicine available to people who are very sensitive and have things like Dravet syndrome and require extremely accurate dosing, why shouldn't we have that available to them? Does it mean that everyone has to use it like that? Absolutely not.
Thanks. Does anyone have anything they want to add to that? No, we're going to move into our. We're going to wait on Q&As because we're really running short on time. So I'm going to throw out one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap up. And you can ask the panelists after the panel. Okay? Thank you. So the last question, in the States, there's a lot of discussion about the difference between using plant-derived terpenes and cannabis-derived terpenes. What are your perspectives and why? AC, you want to start and go down the line?
Yeah, I got into this entire thing because I strongly believe in plants for nutrition and medical use and keeping the plants in their whole form. And we don't know really what the differences are, but for me, I prefer to have the terpene profile in my extract that is from that plant lot, because I mean, metaphysically, I think there's something there, just that. And then from the science of it, as far as the terpene profiles go, from getting lemonade from citrus as opposed from the plant, I just think that it's different, and I like to have that whole. When we start separating out all these things, I think we start losing the purpose of why it's here.
All right, thank you, Matt. Go on.
I can actually see both sides. I can see, if I wanted, the terpenes in the extraction process from the plant, we don't get to concentrate all the terpenes, and some of them are volatile than others, and they won't actually concentrate in there. So having the ability to understand the profile on a plant-based level, and then adding it back into the extraction, whether it came out of it to begin with, if you can actually take the terpenes and remove them before you do the extraction, that's going to be your best bet. But if you cannot do that, and you can get naturally good, organic, non-synthetic terpenes, then I do see where that would have its place too.
Okay, cool. Andrew, you want to chime in on this?
I guess if all you want is the terpenes, cannabis would be a very expensive way to get them. Because like you said, limonene, just go to a citrus or something. So, but cannabis, we talk about cannabis as being like a whole pharmacy, right? So, and in natural health products chemistry, we often look at the plant as a whole. But that being said, if you just want limonene, and you've got 2 jars of limonene in front of you and one's from cannabis, it's going to cost you a lot of money compared to the other one. So.
Cool. Thank you. Marcus, do you want to? I know you might have a lot to say about this.
Yeah, I do. I have some cannabis-derived terpene profiles here, actually, that if people want to come up after the panel and maybe just at the front table here, we can have some smells. I also have my faith in cannabis. Cannabis, unlike oranges and lemons, has been producing terpene profiles that we've been inhaling safely for thousands of years, maybe hundreds, but probably thousands. So I have my faith in cannabis. I own a company here in Canada called Blue River. My partner, Tony, developed a technique that we extract terpenes without the use of chemical solvents or steam or heat, and we get the terpenes off in their cannabinoid-free. So it's a pure cannabinoid profile, and you could then add that back to a particular, that very same cultivar, or you could also modulate the effects of some of the cannabinoids you happen to have that maybe aren't working for you because it's all indica, otherwise known as wide-leaf drug cultivars, and you need something that's more exotic of an expression, more like a sativa, i.e. narrow-leaf drug cultivars, and you can actually take a wide leaf, an indica, a concentrate, and dip it into a sativa's profile of terpenes and get those effects from that plant. And that's the school of Ethan Russo. I believe he's the entourage effect, and Dr. Lester Grinspoon is the ensemble effect. But what they're both talking about is how these terpenes can modulate the effects of cannabinoids very powerfully. So my faith is in cannabis terpenes.
Thank you very much, esteemed panelists, and thank you guys for all of your attention. We're going to wrap up now, and if you do have questions, please feel free to come up and chat with the panelists. Thank you.